Hey everybody, very interesting one today, and this applies to you as an individual, you as a town, a city, a state, a country, a sovereign, whatever you want. It's basically, what is Bitcoin? How does it impact your future? And how can you convince somebody, whether a loved one, or a mayor, or a president, or anybody else, to embrace the Bitcoin standard? So let's jump in. Math, money, and freedom is what this channel is all about. And again, this applies to everybody, not just cities and countries. So first of all, the scenario that triggered this idea: how can I convince my city, state, country to adopt a Bitcoin standard? And how can it benefit our local community and local economy? That's it. So there's details about the community. Imagine a scenario with 1 million people in a city. They have cheap power, and they're somewhere like Canada. So let's see exactly. We're going to paint this in 5 steps. These are the 5 steps you take to convince somebody in power, again, whether it be your loved one or a president, to embrace the Bitcoin standard. So the 5 steps are: educate them on Bitcoin and its technology, show Bitcoin's trajectory, explain mining, explain the relationship between Bitcoin and energy, and 5, finally, talk about the benefits of Bitcoin and what you can unlock with it. Not just the monetary energy, but also governance mechanisms too. There's so much to this. So first of all, let's jump into technology. Bitcoin technology. What is it? Well, you guys know. First of all, it is a revolutionary technology. It is revolutionizing the financial world. It has trustless transactions, tamper-proof systems. It cuts out intermediaries like banks. It is peer-to-peer, and it's maintained and operated exclusively by software and encryption. It is the most powerful computer network in human history, and its network and its cryptography provides reliability and trust, which allows it to hold value. And that is something that people do not recognize. Second of all, game theory. Bitcoin overcomes the Byzantine generals problem. So those who know computer science know the challenge of establishing and maintaining security on a distributed network. And to solve this problem, it needs honest nodes. And these are computers or physical devices. And they need to be able to reach consensus despite the presence of dishonest nodes, which can happen on occasion. Now, the other thing as well is Bitcoin aligns interests. Nations that do not embrace the standard will be penalized for being a laggard. We'll talk more about that in a second. And the fear of being left behind and the evident opportunity cost will put pressure on competing nations to store Bitcoin as a reserve asset or adopt it as a legal currency entirely. That's what they call the game theory. It's you got to get in, and you got to get in early, and if you're left behind, you can never catch up. So Edward Snowden actually reported on this as well. He called it the pressure is on pawn to e4, and basically that's the king's pawn, and it's an opening movement of any chess game, and that's the whole premise behind this game theory. So the fear of being left behind beyond the headlines. There is now pressure on competing nations to acquire Bitcoin, even if only as a reserve asset, as it's designed to massively incentivize early adoption. I always say get in early and get in big if you can, and it'll pay off dividend. So let's look at some of the countries that are actually embracing Bitcoin. And first of all, we'll talk about some of the names here you can see on the map, and I'm keeping this map updated. People embrace it for different reasons. So you have places like El Salvador, which now has Bitcoin as legal tender. You got Uruguay, Panama, Ukraine, Tanzania, Malta, Singapore, Switzerland, Gibraltar, Argentina, Paraguay, Estonia, and Georgia. All these places are moving to the Bitcoin standard, but can you spot any trend? The common traits are either the countries have fiat problems, like inflation, or a history of inflation, or currency debasement, or they're under the thumb of some fiat currency, like the US dollar. The second point is they're also, other than that, they are leading financial services centers, for example, Singapore and Switzerland. And these people know what the future is. And Bitcoin adoption is still in its very early phases, but it is accelerating very fast, and we'll talk more about that too. So El Salvador, probably the poster child of this whole story, is why El Salvador first. It's real easy. They were being crippled by US dollar printing, and the economy relies in a large portion, about 23% of GDP in remittances, of which a big chunk are lost. And just to read this, basically, central banks are increasingly taking actions that may cause harm to the economic stability of El Salvador. And in order to mitigate the negative impact from central banks, it becomes necessary to authorize the circulation of digital currency with a supply that cannot be controlled by any central bank and is only altered in accordance with objective and calculable criteria. That's it. 2 sentences, short and sweet, why El Salvador could justify Bitcoin. But let's talk about the unbanked in the world and why it's a big issue. The world today has about 1.7 billion of unbanked population. And when you are unbanked, you can't do a lot of things. So for example, these are some stats from Georgia, where they are embracing Bitcoin. But the reason people don't use banks is, number one, 6% said they're too far away. 28% said they're too expensive. 37% said they have missing documentation. But there are other issues as well. Most people in the world today, even if they are unbanked, they still have a smartphone. But the real issue behind some of the points above is there is often a culture of corruption in third world countries where people don't trust either the politicians, bureaucrats, or bankers. And now, in many first world countries, second world countries as well, the same is true. But let's go a little bit further. Let's talk about the benefits of being first. So if you are first, you have a better ability to build new jobs, build more innovation into your economy, bank the unbanked, of course, drive capital appreciation, enhance GDP growth, and reimagine the future, because the future is clearly digital, and crypto is the currency of the digital future. Real simple. So let's talk a little bit about how Bitcoin is a revolutionary technology. Most financial systems cannot boast such features as you see below. Traditional financial and payment systems are totally centralized, and for it to work, people need trust in intermediaries. Conversely, the interactions between parties on peer-to-peer exchanges are directed exclusively by pre-programmed software, with no requirement for human middlemen. And firms like Western Union are definitely worried about this change, because peer-to-peer changes everything, and Bitcoin changes everything. Now, Bitcoin is also very widespread. It has a global network with over 11,000 known nodes, and some people estimate as high as 83,000 nodes around the world. So it is definitely very decentralized and in every corner of the planet, which is great. Now let's talk about the Bitcoin trajectory for a second and where it's actually going. So first of all, when we look at Bitcoin adoption, it is following the path of the internet. Now, new technologies such as Bitcoin can be valued by the network effect, and this means adding new users to the network results in exponential gains in value. Think of the telephone. Think about personal computer. So in 1980, less than 1/10% of households had a personal computer. So let's use 1980 as a start of the PC revolution. By 1990, 10% of households owned PCs. And in the year 2000, over 90% of households had a PC. So just think about that. Just in 20 years, it went from 0 to over 90%. In 10 years, 0 to 10%. And another 10 years after that, going from 10% to over 90% adoption. So Bitcoin is on the same path. Some people say it's even steeper. The real fascinating thing is Bitcoin users over the last 12 years went from 0 to 100 million in 12 years. And from 100 million to 200 million in 6 months. And that is a hockey stick moment for this protocol. The other thing as well that's interesting to note is Bitcoin's adoption curve and the Lindy effect. So Bitcoin has quickly adopted the store value narrative beyond a mere techno-geek collectible. Irony is to talk about NFTs right now, but that's a separate issue. But the next step is to be a medium of exchange, and that's already happening in El Salvador. And after that, full global money. And remember, thank you as well to Dan Helt for this and Murad. But the point is that with the Lindy time, the longer it is, the stronger it gets. The longer it is in existence. So let's look at the trajectory as well. Another way of looking at it is in terms of the adoption. So I calculate we are at about 2.5% adoption, which is 2.5% of the world's population. The world's population is about 8 billion. 200 million are the users, divided by 8 billion is 2.5%. So we are really, really early. Two other things to note is getting in early means you get great gains, and that's the whole game theory of this thing. getting in late, basically 10 years from now, things will not be as good. We are approaching the steep part of the S curve. So very impressive times ahead. Another way to look at it is Bitcoin's price trajectory using the Plan B model, stock to flow model. So Bitcoin's price, it has grown exponentially with adoption, and it's flourished during the first decade. But according to Bloomberg, Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the last decade. His worst case scenario is $100,000 for year end 2021 and over $1 million by 2025. So we'll see if that's correct. But so far, his model has been extremely precise. Now let's talk a bit about Bitcoin mining for a second, what this all means. So first of all, how does Bitcoin mining work? So it's performed by high-powered computers that solve computations in order to secure the Bitcoin network. This is a big part of why it is the most secure network and computer system in human history. But the computations do have energy requirements to basically prevent attack and make the network safe. So the cost to attack the network is obscene, so nobody can actually do it. Hence, it's actually very safe. So how does Bitcoin mining work? So Bitcoin mining is necessary to maintain the ledger of transactions upon which Bitcoin is based. Miners are very, very sophisticated, and over the past several years, they have built and enhanced and developed complex machinery to speed up mining operations. Now, Bitcoin is an important component of securing the Bitcoin blockchain by validating transactions as part of creating new blocks. And this is what they call the block puzzle. The miners are incentivized to secure the network because they receive a reward subsidy for helping to secure the network and facilitate transactions. And miners receive rewards from transaction fees and newly minted Bitcoins as well. And then it starts all over again, just goes round and round and round. So let's talk a little bit about where the mining was and where it's going and how it's changed so recently. So China historically dominated the Bitcoin mining, but because of the miner ban in China, because they want to support their own digital yuan as they go forward, this has opened up an opportunity for mining industry to grow and flourish in other countries. So the share of China's hash rate went from about 67% a little over a year ago to now well under 40%. We don't have the exact numbers right now, but places and countries that are picking up the slack are Germany, United States, Ireland, Kazakhstan, and they're all jumping in. And there's others following as well, like Iran, the Ukraine, and El Salvador, perhaps. We'll talk a bit about that later as well. So let's talk about simple mining developments in one state in the United States. So here, 4 little cases of how Texas is quietly using their cheap renewable electricity and building out a Bitcoin industry. So Bitmain built a $500 million center to mine Bitcoin in Alcoa, Texas. The facilities became fully operational 2 years ago, and they have brought 400 new jobs to the local economy. Now, Bitmining has invested $26 million in a 57 megawatt data center to be built in a Texas town. 98% of the energy used is clean and low carbon energy. Argo is building a $100 million Bitcoin mining facility in Texas as well. And a Dallas-based Applied Blockchain is building a host mining system expected to bring in about $60 million in earnings. So these are just some of the examples of how Texas is jumping on this in a very speedy manner. Let's talk about Bitcoin mining and the environment. A lot of FUD is out there saying Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy and all that, but the truth is Bitcoin mining actually drives energy transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Cambridge University's Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index has shown that the carbon footprint has improved dramatically since the China mining ban. And there's also been a shift from older mining rigs in China to newer, more efficient rigs, which have less reliance on as much power. And obviously, coal power in China has not used anymore either. So things that are very important to look at this in this whole space is it offers a way to use unlock or stranded intermittent energy when there's not enough to meet local demand. So basically, what would otherwise be wasted can now be utilized. Now let's talk about Bitcoin and energy and what this all means. So first of all, I believe energy will be Bitcoin denominated in the future. And People may say, hey, that's crazy, but we have a thing called a PetroDollar, which is where barrels of oil are denominated in US dollars. And there's a couple of countries that don't want that anymore. Russia, China, Iran, countries with embargoes and stuff like that. They want this changed. So we'll see what they agree upon, but something's got to give, and we'll see where that goes. But it'd be great to have energy denominated in Bitcoin in the future. Not saying it will happen, but it's likely it could happen. And in Iceland, a case study where there are vast amounts of accessible and inexpensive geothermal renewable energy. But the problem that they have there is the energy is so far away from sources, very difficult to consume and transport. So as a result, they have to build things like aluminium smelting facilities on top of the energy sources and then export the aluminium. But bringing Bitcoin mining to these renewables would be a lot more efficient. In addition, we have a Norwegian case study. Here in Norway, a country rich also in geothermal energy, has invested about 58 million to build a Bitcoin mining unit to use this stranded energy. And it will act as a battery store to access energy in economic value that would otherwise be wasted. That is the beauty of Bitcoin. And probably the most current case is mining can be located anywhere. So Bitcoin has the ability to attract mining to energy that is otherwise stranded. So for example, in El Salvador, they have a volcano that they can use, or it could be a waterfall in Africa, or anything else like that. So all you need to do is bring your Bitcoin network to the facility, plug it in, use the renewable energy, and go from there. And that will in turn drive expansion in infrastructure, roads, houses, schools, hospitals, etc. Humanity will cluster around these cheap energy sources, and Bitcoin will allow people to move to the power and, of course, become wealthier as a result. So this is one of the, on the picture on the right, is one of the sources where engineers in El Salvador have drilled into a volcano. And this well will provide about 95 megawatts of 100% clean energy. The only emission is water vapor. So it's quite exciting. Let's talk about Bitcoin benefits real quick. How much energy, how much monetary energy can be unlocked from Bitcoin? So, for example, we'll take a hydroelectric plant in Canada that can produce more than 630 megawatts of electricity. 1 megawatt is enough generating capacity to power about 1,000 homes. Assuming a city has one plant, one hydroelectric plant can power 630 homes. Therefore, a city with 1 million people, assuming 3 people per house, is about 333,000 households. And that means we have about 297 megawatts of excess energy that the plant is able to generate. And that can be used to do other things. So let's see how we can apply the energy and what it can generate. So if we put half of the unused energy into mining Bitcoin, this is about 150 million watts of electricity. A Bitmain miner, Antminer, uses about 3.25 kilowatts and generates about $12,500 worth of Bitcoin every year, with a Bitcoin price assumed about $44,000, which it is today. Now, utilizing only half of the plant's unused energy, we can support about 46,150 miners, and that will be generating about $578 million in revenue per year, and assuming it's taxed at 20%, that will generate $115 million in taxes. So let's see what we can do with that type of money. So to visualize what $150 million in taxes can do from energy that would otherwise be wasted in a million-person city, is it can fully fund 2 public schools at a cost of $11,000 per student, with roughly 5,000 students. Average cost about $55 million per school. We can build a new hospital. Average cost for a new hospital today with state-of-the-art equipment is about $112 million. We can also send 3,800 students to college every year. Average cost per student to send them away to college is $30,000. We can also feed 14,700 families. A family of 4 spends roughly $7,800 a year on food. And so all of these things can be done, which otherwise there was no funding for. So let's talk about governance as well. So Bitcoin can actually bring about governance. We can tokenize everything. We can tokenize titles, deeds, identification, for example, driving licenses and even marriage licenses. It can also bring transparency to government. We can award contracts on the blockchain and optimize procurement systems. Also, considering it's tamper resistant and publicly accessible, it basically makes everything much more transparent and makes people trust the government much more. Also, grant and aid disbursement. We can cut out the middleman when giving aid and grants, put money directly into the hands of those that need it. And voting. Voting can also be done on the blockchain. It's decentralized, transparent, immutable, and encrypted. And again, cannot be tampered with or rigged. So, away with a lot of problems. Finally, Bitcoin, we believe, could be the basis for international trade. So without any foreign exchange exposure, no wait times, no bank fees. With the blockchain, it's instant settlement, it's secure, it's auditable, it's immutable, and it's just where the direction of the world is actually going. And more importantly as well, this is from Leonard Reed, the more people that are involved in global trade, the more peaceful the world becomes, because there's a direct correlation between increased trade and decreased armed conflict. So in conclusion, thank you for hanging around. I know it's a difficult subject. When we look at the flywheel effect of Bitcoin, first of all, you take an energy source, which fuels Bitcoin mining, which unleashes monetary energy, which enables more capital to be spent, which enables more trade, which increases the GDP per capita. And this is exactly the flywheel effect that we anticipate to see in El Salvador as we go forward. And let's talk about the to-do list for state and local governments. It's important to change the laws to become Bitcoin friendly, i.e. legalize the law stuff that's required, set up a Bitcoin department to educate and implement steps, offer grants to set up Bitcoin mining operations around clean, renewable energy sources. I'm sure there's playbooks available from Texas that people could copy and clone. Hold Bitcoin as a reserve on the city, state, country's balance sheet would be very, very important. And enable financial services as well to custody and trade Bitcoin on behalf of the population. And finally, offer to pay workers in Bitcoin if they so choose, or they can have their normal fiat currency too. And these are some of the steps that have been taken by places like Miami in Florida as well. So finally, in quick summary, Bitcoin is revolutionary. It is growing fast in terms of adoption and trajectory. Bitcoin mining is an important part of the Bitcoin protocol as it secures the network. And it also provides an economic incentive to participate. And of course, with the many benefits, Bitcoin mining can be used as a store of value of excess energy. And Bitcoin brings about a stronger monetary policy. And the future governance is on the blockchain. The future of governance is on the blockchain, most importantly. So hope this helps. Hope this helps with adoption. I hope there's a country out there watching this and they can convince some of their leaders to go down the right path. Thanks, everybody.